Hello, welcome to the Awakening Report. I'm your host, Doug Hamp. I have some special guests today. I'm really excited about bringing them on the Awakening Report. I have Derek and Sharon Gilbert, friends of mine from years ago. We met in Branson, Missouri, if I believe. In fact, that's right. Derek put Rob Skiba and I up to a kind of a little mini debate there on whether it was one incursion or two. And so, of course, we all decided it was actually one or two incursions. But I'm just joking. But it was fun, and thank you, Derek, for kind of shoving us in the ring together. That was fun. Yeah, and so
it also got us a lot of attention from some of the online heresy hunters.
That's right. I know. Yeah, you're never going to please everybody, right? I mean, you're not. Yeah. Now, you guys have since moved to Missouri. Mm-hmm. And you're part of Skywatch TV. You guys do all kinds of cool stuff, unraveling Revelation, and you do Sci Friday, mm-hmm. and a lot of fun. You just wrote a book recently called Veneration, which I am really excited to dig into. I think it sounds absolutely fascinating. This idea here that unveiling the ancient realms of demonic kings and Satan's battle plan for Armageddon, which is pretty cool. I've actually started writing a book, not the same direction you guys have gone, but this idea of kind of what Satan's end game in a sense. And so this should be a lot of fun. So how did you guys I know you've been talking about these types of things, but this particular niche, how did you get into this idea, doing all this research and really trying to uncover this all of the history behind the Genesis 6 giants and all that stuff? I mean, you have so many cool ideas.
I'm going to let Derek really give you the big answer, but I will just start by saying from the very beginning, the Lord has sort of led us to this notion of being spies on the field. What the first podcast we did was called Peering into Darkness, PID Radio, and we don't have time to really do that one anymore, but Peering into Darkness is what we have been called to do, to understand and profile the fallen realm and to try to decipher their battle plans and report back to our companions on the battlefield, because we're all of us born and standing on that battlefield.
And one of the things that that really fascinates us, I guess, is looking at the weird parts of the Bible. And, going back to 2011 in the Future Congress, where you and Rob and Ellie Marzulli was part of that group too.
Yeah, it was a great group.
That was really, when you think about it, that was an amazing session. And at the time, I didn't realize how much that would influence the course of our lives. Because here we are almost 10 years later. And as we've been researching and allowed to devote full time to research, thanks to Tom Horn and Skywatch TV, the more we pulled on those threads, the weird parts of the Bible. Okay, what did the neighbors of ancient Israel believe about the spirit realm? Mm-hmm. And we kept finding references to the Rephaim, which were just the name given to the spirits of the Nephilim by people of later generations. So
demons.
Yeah, so in Genesis 6, they're called Nephilim. They're mentioned again in the book of Numbers. But the Nephilim, it was understood, were long ago mighty men who were of old, men of renown. By the time of Abraham, there were still these tribes called Rephaim, who were descendants of perhaps the Nephilim, who lived in the Transjordan, that area east of the Jordan River, later occupied by Moab and Edom and Ammon, and Og of Bashan, who was the last of the remnant of the Rephaim. But lo and behold, when you start looking at what the pagans, the Amorites, the Canaanites around ancient Israel believed, you find that they knew who the Rephaim were. Mm-hmm. And furthermore, they believed that upon death, their kings would join the assembly of the Rephaim and the council of the Ditanu. Well, the Ditanu, come to find out in the research for Last Clash of the Titans, was the name of an ancient Amorite tribe, known historically as a group that helped destroy the last Sumerian kingdom in Mesopotamia. But by the time of the Judges, they were considered this underworld group that had some special status in the underworld. There was a temple for them at the ancient Amorite kingdom of Ugarit, where we found these texts about 100 years ago that have really helped illustrate what the prophets knew about the Rephaim. And they venerated these things. And so, Sharon, who comes up with all of the good ideas that come out of our house. We've done so much research on this, and it's not only gone into the nonfiction books that I've written previously, but it's also goes into her series of novels, the Red Wing Saga, that she said, we really need to write a book just on this aspect of it. My previous book, Last Clash of the Titans, kind of focused on the Titans, the old gods of the Greeks who were banished to Tartarus, and argued that they were the angels who sinned, the angels of the sons of God of Genesis 6, who created the Nephilim. Now we needed to do one on what they created. But rather than trying to recreate the work of guys like L.A. Marzulli and Rob Skiba and you and Steve Quayle and Tom Horn and Timothy Alberino, looking for the physical evidence of these giants, we wanted to look at their religion. What did they inspire? And so we turned to the pagan texts of the ancient world.
Wow.
And we can document. I mean, we can't show you any bones, but we can show you the documents that prove that the pagan neighbors of ancient Israel worshipped these spirits.
The document that scholars, the secular scholars have been talking about for decades, and they don't get it because they're not approaching it with a Christian worldview. Most Christians don't get it because they're not trying to look at the secular papers.
Right.
That's what we've been digging into, especially Derek. He's really been, that's fun reading to him.
Fun Friday night, finding a new paper on Canaanite cosmology.
So many mornings we've been sitting there drinking our coffee, and all of a sudden he goes, oh, there's a new paper on at academia.
Yeah. So in Veneration, we just show how important this worship was to the Amorite and Canaanite neighbors of ancient Israel, and how that shows up in the Bible, because it's clear that the prophets knew what their neighbors believed. And not only that, we can show how these spirits are mentioned in end times prophecy and how their ultimate destruction is prophesied. So yeah, the Nephilim are coming back at Armageddon.
And what we've discovered is that, sadly, as with history and the way history is approached in most educational settings, the way the Bible is taught is very dry and boring. The fact is, if you really start to put yourself into the context of the people who first heard the words that we take for granted, let there be light and so on, they understood it in a pagan world. And so that's it's like deciphering the hidden message. Suddenly you realize that from the get-go, it's all about a spiritual war. It's the Lord taking back territory that the fallen realm have claimed. And he uses their worship styles, their ceremonies, their own words against them over and over. But if you don't read the academic papers, you won't understand the hidden message there. And if kids knew that, they would be so excited about wanting to read the Old Testament, wanting to get in it, because it's better than any comic book. It's better than any Marvel movie out there.
Well, do you think that this insurgence of superhero movies is kind of setting the stage for the return of the Nephilim? I mean, who doesn't want to be Captain America, right? Just shoot me up with some kind of formula and I become a super stud. I mean, that's really cool, right? I don't have to do any push-ups and I get that. That'd be awesome,
Well, yeah, and I think we kind of misstate the case, or maybe misrepresent it a little bit when we say return of the Nephilim.
Okay.
Because they never really went away. One of the things we show in Veneration is how it was the belief of the apostles in the early church that demons, the origin of demons, can be traced back to Noah's flood. The spirits of the Nephilim who were destroyed in the flood became the demons that are with us to this very day. So the Nephilim never left. They've been called Rephaim since, or demons since then. But when you read the writings of the early church fathers, and we quote several just very briefly, Origen and Julian
Africanus,
Justin.
But Julian Africanus actually was one who started pushing us on the path toward the sons of Seth theory, the Sethite theory, along with Augustine.
Augustine, yes.
Yeah, but Irenaeus and Origen and Justin Martyr. Justin Martyr was who I was trying to think of.
Okay.
They all understood that the spirits of the giants, the Nephilim, were what we call demons.
Okay. I just have a little technicality on that, because I read Philo, and he suggests that angels and demons are exactly the same. So,
well, that's a Greek belief.
It's a minor footnote, but
that's actually a Greek belief. They believed that all the demones were the same entities, except there were good ones and bad ones.
Okay.
Right, right. Interesting that Hesiod, who wrote a lot of what we know about Greek mythology, or their religion, actually, more properly, believed that the daemons proceeded from the spirits of men who lived during the Golden Age when Kronos ruled in heaven. But the term that he used for men who lived during the Golden Age was anthropoi, meropes anthropoi.
Oh, yes.
Meropes anthropoi. It was also used by Homer to describe men of that era, the heroic age. And the term meropes, a scholar by the name of Amar Anus, back in 1999, wrote this paper that kind of went unnoticed until Mike Heiser kind of put us onto Anus and some of his other research. And then I found this paper. It's like, Mike, have you seen this one? Because he showed that the Greek understanding of their heroes, the meropes anthropoi, the men of the Golden Age, that term meropes actually comes from the Amorite, Canaanite, Semitic term behind the word Rephaim, the hero of the Greeks. The demigods of the Greeks were the Rephaim, or the Nephilim of the Canaanites and the Hebrews. They were one and the same.
And one of the big things about the Rephaim that Derek has sort of unpacked in his books is that they want to return to that golden age. They want to have the bodies that they used to have. They want to be the powerful entities and kings that they were before Noah's flood. And there is a promise in the Bible that says specifically that will be denied to them.
Wow. Do you remember which verse it is?
Derek doesn't know.
I'm really curious now.
Oh, well, yes.
They are dead. They shall not rise.
Right.
Oh, Isaiah 14, is that right?
Yeah. Well, actually, that's Isaiah 26. Isaiah 26.
Okay. 13, yes.
Verse 19. Because they are dead. They shall not rise. But that word translated dead does mean dead. But they are spirits. They are shades. Actually, they are Rephaim. They are Rapha. They will not rise. And then you get to verse 19. And here's the interesting thing. And we really dig into this and unpack this. It's let's see, let me bring this up here. The English Standard Version kind of conceals it, as do most English translations.
Right.
Verse 19, your dead shall live, their bodies shall rise. This is referring now to the faithful, those who are faithful followers of Yahweh. You who dwell in the dust, awake and sing for joy, for your dew is a dew of light. And then it says, and the earth will give birth to the dead. Now, here's the thing. The verb translated give birth is nafal, which is curious because everywhere else in the Bible, it means to fall down, and when you look at the Septuagint translation, which is the translation produced by Jewish scholars about 200 to 300 years before Jesus, they rendered the verse this way. Verse 19, Isaiah 26:19, the dead will rise, and those in the tombs will be raised, and those in the earth will rejoice. For the dew from you is a remedy for them. And then the final verse they render this way, but the land of the impious, or the ungodly, will fall. And scholars who've looked at this say, this was produced in a Hellenized world. The Jewish scholars of Alexandria, or whoever, wherever they were, was it Alexandria where they translated the Septuagint?
I think it might have been.
Anyway, the Jewish scholars were producing this, I think, for one of the, Ptolemy, who was the Greek king of Egypt at that time.
That would have been
one of the Ptolemies, right? So anyway, they were aware of what the Greeks believed. They understood Greek religion, but they also understood the Semitic or Mesopotamian origins of the Greek religion. The land of the impious refers to Tartarus, the land of the Titans, the creators of the Rephaim mentioned back in verse 13. So there's more going on in Isaiah 26 here. The earth will give birth to the dead. No. The land of the impious, the land of the ungodly, will be destroyed. So not only will the Rephaim not be raised when the rest of us are raised, see 1 Corinthians 15, beginning around verse 32, where Paul says, at the last trump, we shall all be incorruptible. But the Rephaim will not be raised. And the land of the impious, the land of the ungodly, and again, scholars who've looked at this, secular scholars in peer-reviewed academic journals say this is probably a reference to Tartarus, which is where they knew the Titans or the Watchers of Hebrew tradition. They're paraphrasing, not mine.
And
would have been destroyed.
Here's what's so exciting about the things that Jesus did when he was here. over and over again, he signaled to the fallen realm what he was trying to do, what he was about to do. I mean, one of those signals was massive. He stood on Mount Hermon, the Mount of Transfiguration, with two resurrected entities from the Old Testament with him. And he was standing at El's threshing floor.
Right.
And Derek's going to explain why that's a big deal.
Well, Sharon wrote a wonderful chapter in the book Veneration about threshing floors and what they represent in the ancient world. They were more than just a place to separate the wheat from the chaff. It was a place that was considered a portal to the spirit realm. We see this in the story of David, who stopped the destroyer, who stopped the angel of God. It was executing judgment on the people of Israel for David ordering the census, where he stopped at the threshing floor of Arana, bought the threshing floor of Arana, sacrificed to God there. God put a stop to it. And that's where the temple was built. That's where the Dome of the Rock stands today, on top of the Temple Mount, on top of the threshing floor of Arana. Now, in these pagan texts from the ancient kingdom of Ugarit, these Amorite kingdom from about the time of the Judges, there are several texts that scholars have only translated within the last 40 or 50 years, Doug, which is really exciting that we've got access to these that the great theologians of the last 2,000 years didn't even know existed.
Great point.
These are so-called the Rephaim texts.
Wow.
And in these texts, the Rephaim, the spirits, are summoned from the underworld. And there's a lot of depth here, but I'm going to try to make this as simple as I can. I tend to rabbit trail.
Go for it. I'm loving it.
They're described as
I'll get my wabbit gun.
That's it. One bullet left. Yes. They're described as chariot warriors, which is significant because the chariot was a symbol in ancient Mesopotamia for what the vehicle you needed to cross the realm from the realm of the living to the land of the dead. Okay, as in later Jewish Merkava mysticism, where you would take a chariot up to heaven. It's how Elijah was carried off to heaven.
Exactly.
Right.
And so, God is going in a chariot as well, right? In the book of Ezekiel, which is interesting.
Yes.
Yeah.
So you got that symbolism there. And so these chariot warriors are told to mount their horses, mount their chariots, and then travel as they're summoned to the threshing floor of El for a ritual meal,
so Mount Hermon.
Meal. And this is Mount Hermon. They're summoned. They travel one day and then another, and they arrive at the threshing floor of El at dawn of the third day. I mean, it literally says this in these texts, where the name of El, which is this name theology that we see in the Old Testament, where God sends his name before him. His name is in the angel of Yahweh who leads the Israelites out of Egypt. Right. Hashem, the name. Yeah. Well, of course, the pagan Amorites and Canaanites had the same thing. They said, okay, the name of El will revivify the warriors of Baal. What these Rephaim are called, the warriors of Baal. But what's interesting is in one of these texts where they're summoned to this ritual feast being held in their honor, they are literally called travelers because they travel or cross over from one plane of existence to another. And this is the key that links them into end times prophecy, because in Ezekiel 39, verse 11, which is God describing to Ezekiel how this cataclysmic war will end, the war to end all wars. On that day, I will give to Gog a place for burial in Israel, the valley of the travelers east of the sea.
I was going to ask you about that because I was thinking about that as you were talking about
that. That's exactly what it is.
See, this is where your study of Hebrew gives you an advantage for most people who read the English Bible, because we don't understand this. It will block the travelers, for their Gog and all his multitude will be buried. Now, we show in this book, and also I showed in Last Clash of the Titans, that Gog, in our view, is to be equated with the Antichrist of the end times.
I totally agree with you. Can I interject something here?
Please,
I think you're going to like this. Okay, because I'm kind of excited about this. So I've been studying the word Gog, and it's not really a Hebrew root. I mean, the Hebrew would just be roof or something like that, and that doesn't make any sense. So I took it back to Sumerian, and in the Sumerian, it means enemy or hostility.
Yeah,
and I'm like, hello, this is it, right? And then if you take that valley of Hamon Gog, where it's going to obstruct the travelers, if you then take that over to Isaiah 66, it says they will go out and look upon the corpses, the piglim, of the men who transgressed against me. All right, so I pair those together because I think they're talking about one and the same place. That if you put them together, that this is going to obstruct the travelers who are traveling to Jerusalem, presumably, or Mount Zion, if you will.
Right.
Exactly. You know? And that this whole thing of traveling one day and then another and arriving dawn of the third day. Well, what else happened on dawn of the third day?
Yes. And the point of their arriving at this ritual meal is that El will resurrect or revivify these warriors of Baal.
Exactly.
Now switch to the New Testament in Matthew, I believe it's chapter 12, where Jesus is accused of casting out demons by the power of Beelzebul or Baal the prince. And Jesus said, look, if Satan casts out demons by the power of himself, how will his kingdom stand? He basically identifies Baal as Satan.
But let's get back to
absolutely.
Let's get back to the transfiguration, because he's not there alone. He's signaling on the threshing floor where the Rephaim are hoping that they are going to be called and resurrected. He's standing there saying, look what I can do.
Yeah.
And look who's with me.
Elijah and Moses.
Elijah, who was translated just on the other side of the Jordan River in the area of the Valley of the Travelers, and Moses, who was buried in the Valley of the Travelers.
That's right.
He's saying, I'm resurrecting these guys, even though they're in your territory, but no.
I mean, it's the evidence all points to this location and connects all these dots. I mean, when Moses was told to climb Mount Nebo to get his only look at the promised land, in the book of Deuteronomy, it says, climb this mountain of the Avarim,
the travelers.
And so he's there and he's looking across the river at Jericho, and down in the plains of Moab is where he's buried.
And he's also looking at Sodom's ruins.
And that's the other thing.
The ruins of the travelers.
We devoted a chapter to called Ruins of the Travelers. And on the Exodus route, there are a couple of place names that refer specifically to the spirits of the dead. One is called Ovoth, which literally means spirits of the dead. It's based on the root word ov, from which you get Ovarim or Avarim. The cognate in the Canaanite would be Ovarim. And then there's
the Witch of Endor.
And the Witch of Endor was the Ov of Endor. Yeah.
Okay.
And interestingly, then one of the giants, and Brian Godawa pointed this out to us, and he wrote this into his book on David, his novel on David, where Ishbi ben Ob, we've always seen that put together. Ishbi ben Ob. No, it's Ishbi ben Ov. Ishbi, the son of the medium. Wouldn't it be interesting if he was the son of the medium who was visited by Saul the night before he died?
That would be
we don't know that for a fact, but that would be really interesting.
There's a long Jewish tradition that she was the mother to Goliath and his brothers.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's very interesting.
So you've got Moses buried in the plains there of Moab. And the other place name it was called Ai Ha'avarim, which means ruins of the travelers. And the connection to Sodom and Mount Nebo and Jericho in the plains of Moab is this. For the last 15 years, a team from Trinity Southwest University has been digging at a site called Tal El Hammam, which is about 6 miles northeast of the north end of the Dead Sea. It's about 3 or 4 miles northwest of Mount Nebo. You can see the site from Mount Nebo. As you look towards the northwest, it's like this little finger of a hill that's kind of sticking into the plain around it. It's about 75 to 100 feet above the plain. The upper tell or tall is about 150 feet above the plain. And they found really good evidence there, scientific evidence that is the location of ancient Sodom.
Wow.
Now, at the base of the tall are about 500 dolmens. And dolmens are these funerary monuments that date back to the time of Abraham and even earlier. So we're talking Middle to early Bronze Age. They look like miniature Stonehenges, kind of. Two big slabs of rock with a tabletop slab across the top. A trilithon. There are 500 still standing, but at one time there were 1,500. And scholars are pretty sure that these were funerary monuments that were built, and they date them to, again, down to about 1800 BC, going back to about 3300 BC. Sodom there, if this is the site, and about 90% convinced it was, 95%, they date it to about 1750 BC. So there are more of these dolmens, and we saw several when we were on our Israel tour back in May. There are more of them in the Jordan River Valley than anywhere on earth. I mean, you find them all over, the United Kingdom, Korea, the Caucasus Mountains, but more of them in the Jordan than anywhere else. And there were more of them at the base of this ruined city than anywhere in the Jordan Valley. So think about it. If this was the site of Sodom, so say about 1750 BC, it's destroyed. Roughly 400 years later, roughly 400 years later, Moses and the Israelites show up. And they see this ruined city on a hill with 1,500 of these massive stone funerary monuments at its base. We think that was Ai Ha'avarim, the ruins of the travelers right there. The ruins of the demons. And what happened there? And why does it all connect to our book Veneration? Because it was there in the plains of Moab before they crossed over the Jordan River that they began to eat sacrifices offered to the dead. And God was furious, and he sent a plague that killed 4,000. Well, most of us, I always thought it was because of what the prince of Israel and the princess of Midian did in the sight of all Israel. They were doing some fertility rite or something.
Yeah.
I think they were
Battle of Peor, right? That's where the young ladies came
exactly.
in.
I think it was a sex rite to try to inhabit.
And then God, of course, talks about that in Revelation. He's still ticked off about that.
Right.
You know, where you have Balaam, who tried to curse the people, but he couldn't, right? Because God would not allow him. But he's like, hey, Balak, tell your young ladies to come tell the boys of Israel, this is how we worship our God. We're God's boys, you know. And then God destroyed them because that didn't work out so well. So
no. But what's interesting is when you go to Psalm 106, verses 28 and 29, it wasn't that fertility. That's not even mentioned by the psalmist who wrote 400 years after the conquest. He wrote it was that Israel yoked themselves to the Baal of Peor.
Right.
And we show in the book that the word Peor probably means cleft or gap or opening, like opening to the underworld. It was
interesting
sacrifices offered to the dead that made God angry, provoked his anger, and caused the plague. So
I've heard that Peor meant orifices on your body. That
no.
But you guys suggested something different. Okay.
No, the scholars out there tend to think that it actually means opening, as in a portal.
And especially in this context where you're talking about this area that was known as a place, the Valley of the Travelers, beneath the Mountain of the Travelers, Mount Avarim.
And add to that the dolmens, according to the archaeologists who have been working this site, the dolmens all point in towards the same place, which he believes is the temple.
Yeah.
So that's probably sitting over the opening to the underworld.
Yeah. So we're really excited. In fact, I interviewed the science director for the dig there, Dr. Philip Sylvia, back in the spring, about a year ago now. In fact, they're on location right now in Jordan, digging as we
and they take volunteers.
Yeah. Wow. So we're trying to figure out, is there a way we can ever fit this into a schedule to go through part of that?
So this begs the question, do you guys think that maybe the portal that will be open in Revelation chapter 9 could be at that place?
It could be there. It could be, I tell you what, we've also been in this temple, Sodom, lies close to this. We've been, for the next book that we're writing, which is tentatively titled Beguiled, one of the things we're really looking at is the settlement and the activity along the Dead Sea Transform, which is itself, we believe, a long, massive portal.
That's a fault line that runs from the Red Sea in the south all the way up to Turkey in the north. And when you start looking at historic events, important spiritual events in the history of the Bible, with the exception of Babel, which was in southeastern Iraq, on almost on the coast of the Persian Gulf, everything else happened along this fault line. I mean, in the north, you had the holy mountain of Baal, Mount Zaphon. In the south, you had Sinai or somewhere near it. We're going to argue, well, no, we don't want to give
that away. Don't give that away.
Keep the good ones. There you go.
But you got Jerusalem, that's not far from
Gilgal, Rephaim.
Rephaim in the north, which is an ancient megalithic site that we'll be investigating again in the spring.
And by the way, just recently, a pyramid structure, what is believed to be a pyramid structure, was discovered at the south end of the Dead Sea, which is along the transform.
Sea of Galilee.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, that's right. Galilee, yes.
Yeah, I mean, Gilgal Rephaim is bigger and older than Stonehenge. They estimate about 40,000 tons of stone in that thing.
Wow.
And this thing that they found underneath the south end of the Sea of Galilee, very close to where the Jordan River exits the sea, it's under like 30 feet of water. They estimate that's got about 60,000 tons of stone in it. This big pyramidal shape down there.
At one time was above the water.
Yeah, but they only discovered it about 7 or 8 years ago. And I was like, What?
That's crazy. Now, one of the things you guys talked about in your book is why God stopped the construction of the Tower of Babel. I'm very curious about that. So I'd love to hear what you guys discovered.
Well, this goes back to my first book, really, The Great Inception, and the research for that. And credit to David Rohl, who's an Egyptologist who rejects the official chronology. Peter Goodgame turned me on to David Rohl's work.
It doesn't write from a Christian worldview, but Rohl, I think, draws some good conclusions.
He really does. And he's been featured in Timothy Mahoney's recent films on the patterns of evidence. we believe that Babel was actually the ancient city of Eridu, which the Sumerians remembered as their first city. There's some circumstantial evidence to suggest that that might be the city that was built by Cain. There's a temple there, a ziggurat there, that is the oldest, and if it had been completed, would have been the largest one ever in Mesopotamia, larger than that massive one that Saddam Hussein was rebuilding at the ancient city of Ur for the moon.
Okay.
Larger than the temple of Marduk at Babylon. This was a temple for the ancient god called Enki, who was the trickster god, the god of magic, the god who supposedly brought the gifts of civilization to humanity through his assistants called the Apkallu, who were just the Mesopotamian version of the Watchers. But the interesting thing is that in a poem that's been preserved from ancient Sumer called Enmerkar and the Lord of Aratta, and I show why we believe Enmerkar was the biblical Nimrod. I mean, like Nimrod, he was the second king of the city of Uruk or Erech after the flood. He wanted to build, expand, and really glorify this temple to Enki as an abode of the gods. But the key point is that this temple was above the Apsu, which was the source of all fresh water, which of course was essential in a country like Iraq, which is mostly desert, and the source of all knowledge and civilization and the gifts of civilization.
Essentially another portal.
Yeah, essentially another portal. The temple was called the Abzu, which means literally house of the abyss. So Nimrod was trying to build a portal, an abode of the gods right above the abyss, another entry to the netherworld. So like the Baal of Peor, which likewise was destroyed.
Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. So maybe there was a reason Sodom was destroyed that had nothing to do with their lifestyle choice. It was something that God personally intervened to stop, as with Sodom. So, yeah, that's why that was what we think was going on there. Mankind had rejected God's authority yet again. Nimrod was trying to build a world kingdom, an empire, drawing everybody into cities. And I kind of explored that a bit in a couple of my previous books as to how his civilization was different from the ones that had gone before.
In fact, there's a verse that talks about doing this lest they fill the world with cities.
Oh, yeah.
But the word cities is not the correct translation. Do you remember the address of that verse?
There are a couple, and that's in Isaiah 14. One of the things we've discovered, and I'm sure you've run into this, Doug, because again, you're coming at this with the benefit of having studied Hebrew and learned Hebrew.
We just sort of poke around at it.
Yeah.
Sure, I understand.
Trying not to fall into the trap of using, of what's exegesis by Strong's. I mean, Strong's can help.
It's a good start,
right?
But
in Isaiah 14, we find is just an amazing chapter because it tells us more about the history of this supernatural war and its prophetic conclusion than almost any other single chapter in the Bible. But the key is understanding that the Israelite prophets, the Hebrew prophets, sometimes used loan words from other languages.
Sure. Yeah, that's true.
In particular, was living in the time of Hezekiah, who was trying to develop a stronger political and military alliance with Egypt to offset the growing strength of the Babylonians to the east and the continued threat from the Assyrians to the northeast. He used a couple of interesting loan words. And in fact, I'm going to expand on this a little bit. Just again, Isaiah 14, for people who aren't familiar, this is the famous chapter that in the King James Version includes the verse, "How thou art fallen, O Lucifer, son of the morning."
Yes.
And it goes on, through the 5 I wills. It talks about his goal, his mission, if you will. I will sit on the mount of assembly in the far reaches of the north. Well, that phrase, the north and the far reaches of the north, Yarakate Sephon, only appears a couple other places in the Bible. And significantly, one of them is Ezekiel 38 and 39, the origin point for the hordes of Gog and Magog.
But it's also used of God's city, right? Of Mount Zion.
Well, in Psalm 48, there's a contrast where the verse compares Zion to Zephon, and it's kind of a wordplay. It's Harat Zion Yarkatate Zephon. And, the psalmist, even in the days of David, they knew enough geography to know that, Mount Zion really isn't in the far north. And it says beautiful in elevation. Okay, Zion's not even the tallest hill in Jerusalem. The Mount of Olives is taller. The Western Hill is taller. Mount Scalpus is taller. So it was a contrast. God's mount of assembly, the mount of the congregation. That's the key. Whose mount of assembly reigns supreme? And in Isaiah 14, you see that this is the goal of the rebel from Eden. Lucifer wants to establish his mount of assembly, Mount Zaphon. And again, remember, Lucifer, Baal, the storm god, everyone in the ancient world knew that was branch. Now, the word in branch, correct my pronunciation, Doug, if I get this wrong, because I don't, I'm doing the best I can, but I haven't studied this. Netzer?
Sure. Yeah, Netzer.
Netzer, okay.
Yeah.
The thing is, in Egyptian, that word was a well-known word that means divinized dead god.
Okay.
Now, why would that be relevant? Because in this context, you go back up to verse 9, Sheol is beneath is stirred up to meet you, rebel from Eden. When you come, it rouses the shades, it rouses the Rapha, it rouses the Rephaim to greet you. All who were leaders of the earth, it raises from their thrones all who were kings of the nation. These are the mighty men who were of old. This is a reference to the spirits of the Nephilim, the Rephaim. They're now in Sheol. They're greeting now their new Lord of the dead, Lucifer, Baal, Satan, who wants to establish his mount of assembly as supreme. But you are cast out, verse 19, away from your grave like a loathed, dead, divinized god, or a divinized dead god. This is a term that in Egyptian would often apply to Osiris, who is a god of the underworld, a god of the dead. That's why he's always got green skin in the pictures. You will not be joined with them in burial because you've destroyed your land, you've slain your people. Now, here's the prophetic part, we think. May the offspring of evildoers nevermore be named. Prepare slaughter for his sons because of the guilt of their fathers, lest they rise and possess the earth and fill the face of the world with cities. And here's where the other loan word comes into play. The word cities in Hebrew is irim.
Yeah.
In Aramaic, that same word means watchers. Lest they rise and possess the earth and fill the face of the world with watchers.
They do the same thing that they did in the so-called golden age before the flood.
Yeah, it means to awake, right? So to be awake, to watch.
Right, because cities required a watchman on the wall.
Exactly. So there's a connection between the idea of a watcher and cities, but it seems to me that filling the world with these pre-flood watcher entities is a whole lot more dangerous than having a bunch of cities.
Right. And we see that word used, by the way, to mean watcher in Daniel chapter 4, which is the dream of Nebuchadnezzar.
Yes, that's true.
Right.
Yes,
sure.
exactly.
So we're trying not to look at every occasion of the word cities in the Old Testament.
No. It's all context.
Yeah,
sure.
Irim really means Irim. But there are other times, I think, where the context suggests, and again, this is not, us trying to make stuff up, that we're drawing this from some peer-reviewed Bible scholars who've published in academic journals. But we go to Numbers 24. We go to Numbers 24, and we see something else interesting that I've written about this both in Last Clash of the Titans and and we included this in Veneration. Verse 17, and this is a messianic prophecy when Balaam was trying to curse Israel, but God wouldn't let him. I see him, but not now. I behold him, but not near. A star shall come out of Jacob, and a scepter shall rise out of Israel. It shall crush the forehead of Moab and break down all the sons of Sheth. Now, the question is, who are the sons of Sheth? Well, you turn to secular historians and archaeologists, and they know the Sheth were the Shutu or Shazu, which is a tribe of nomadic Amorites who occupied the Transjordan area, like Moab, Edom, and Ammon. Well known in the ancient world. They're mentioned in some Egyptian texts. In fact, they're mentioned as being exceptionally tall in some of the Egyptian texts. Like there's a very famous stela after where the Battle of Ramses the Great took on the Hittites near the Orontes River in Kadesh in northern Syria. And a couple of Shazu spies are being interrogated by the Egyptian soldiers, and the Shazu spies are as tall on their knees as the Egyptian soldiers are standing up.
Wow.
So these were known to be exceptionally tall, but interestingly, these were known in the ancient, further east in ancient Mesopotamia, the Akkadians, as the Suteans. The Suteans.
Okay.
And we document through the work of secular archaeologists that the Suteans, around the time of Abraham, had their name changed. Prior to Abraham, they were called the Tidanu, which is the tribe that destroyed the ancient the last Sumerian kingdom, and were known as the origin of the name of the Greek gods, the Titans, the ones who got punished and sent down to Tartarus. The Titans, aka the Watchers, the sons of God from Genesis chapter 6. So I know there's a lot of dots to connect, but I think what this means is it will crush the forehead of Moab and break down the sons of Shet, the sons of the Suteans, the sons of the Titans. In other words, the Rephaim.
Yes.
The Nephilim.
Wow.
And then if we skip to verse 19, I think it puts an exclamation point on it. One from Jacob shall exercise dominion. Again, that's the Messiah, and destroy the survivors of cities. No, destroy the survivors of the Watchers. I think this is an end times prophecy of the destruction of the spirits of the Nephilim, the Rephaim, and their progenitors. By the way, are the critters who come out of the abyss in Revelation 9.
Amen. Preach it, brother.
Wow. That's a lot of stuff. That is
well, we like being content rich here.
I know. That's good.
Honey.
That's fantastic. My goodness. Wow. Well, it's exciting stuff. I think all of us do our very best to connect the dots. We do our research to the best of our abilities and say, okay, this is what I got. And I mean, that's very, very fascinating stuff. Very fascinating.
Well, we tried to footnote it all again so that we can, and there are times, obviously, when we're saying, look, we're speculating on this, and maybe we're stretching this too far, but here is what the scholars have told us about the meaning of this word. And in the context here, this seems to make more sense. This seems to fit. So destroy the survivors of cities. Yeah, okay, maybe. I mean, maybe they're saying the enemy survivors, their cities will be destroyed. But you're talking about in a context where you've mentioned the sons of Sheth.
Spiritual context.
And if you look at what Isaiah wrote in chapter 14, Isaiah 14, clearly mentioning Sheol and the spirits of the Rephaim in the underworld. And this loan word from Egyptian, which was in common use in Egyptian, would probably have been known to the Israelites because there was a lot of cultural cross-pollination between Canaan and Egypt for centuries. It fits. It seems to fit anyway. It makes sense. Now, we won't know for sure until it actually happens, and we can all look at this in the rearview mirror.
Oh, look, that's what it meant.
I know. I that's the 30 minutes in silence in heaven, or we're all changing our charts. We're like, wait a second.
I love that.
All of you got this right.
Yeah. I think it's. I definitely speculate, and I always try to tell people, okay, I'm speculating right now, right? Because we don't know. We're talking about things that happened in the past. We're doing our very, very best to go back and to connect some dots, and then we're trying to sort of take the prophetic text and say, okay, this is what we think is going to happen in the future. But it's very interesting. So, okay, so what you're saying then is Satan's battle plan is to essentially open up the abyss, let out these Rephaim creatures, these Nephilim, as it were, and then they're going to come and attack people on earth. Is that correct?
Oh, I think so. I think that Satan knows the Bible very, very well. He understands the translation a whole lot better than we do.
Sure.
And he's taken a look at this prophecy that the dead will not rise, they will not be resurrected. And I think he's just going, oh, yeah. I'm going to find there's a loophole here somewhere.
Right. And that's assuming that these demonic spirits aren't already with us. I mean, clearly we know that demonic possession still takes place today. But I think what's going to happen is this, regardless of where we place, the timing of when the church is removed from the earth. If we are correct in that the war of Gog and Magog, which ends with God saying, the world will know that I am the God in Israel, the holy one in Israel, instead of the Holy One of Israel. It's the only place in the scriptures where he uses the term Holy One in Israel, which is why we conclude this is the war of Gog and Magog ends with Armageddon. I think the church will not be on earth at this time. I keep saying I meant we. It's our book, so forgive me for saying you. But we think that the church won't be here at that point, and so there's really no restrainer anymore to protect the unsaved who are part of this end times army. It's really a spiritual army. And when we look at the uttermost points of the north in Ezekiel 38 and 39, and we just look at a map and say, oh, must be Russia, we're missing the point that we're talking about cosmic north. And the prophets were talking about cosmic north. Yakutate Sephon was talking about a mountain that everyone in the ancient world knew had supernatural connections. That's where the Canaanites' chief god lives, and that's where the enemy is coming from the north, and is coming to, and these travelers will be part of this army. I think it's a demonically possessed army. There will be humans in it, of course, but I think demons. When you think about it, if it's a demonically possessed army, and these spirits are the spirits of the dead Nephilim who've been wandering the earth for thousands of years, this is literally the ultimate zombie apocalypse.
That's right. That's right. And you know what's also interesting is if you take Gog from, instead of it being the chief prince of, or the prince of Russia, as some people, I used to take that position.
I do too, but I've changed my mind on that.
Yeah, but if you take it more as the chief prince,
right?
I asked myself, well, the chief prince of what?
Yeah.
And then you go to Daniel, where it talks about the prince of Greece and the prince of Persia. So if I have a whole theory, I won't go into it, but basically, for simplicity, let's say it's Satan. Then he is the chief prince of all these other lesser princes. I kind of think that Satan and the Antichrist kind of do this little melding thing. And anyway, so I'm trying not to geek out on that, but so they kind of take on the same role. It's like Sauron and the Ring, like they're the same. Yeah. So basically their identities merge at this point. So then he's the chief prince of all these other chief of the prince of Persia and the prince of Greece, etc. So I definitely am on board with you guys.
I think spiritually, he's already the prince of all of those spirits.
Exactly. Right. Exactly.
But he hasn't manifested to the material world as that yet. But Jesus called him the prince of this world, and he, didn't challenge Satan when Satan said, "I'll give you all this."
Yeah, Jesus, like, what are you talking about? He's like, it's yours, actually, and
yeah. But we ultimately, the fallen realm, they puzzle over how to decipher the clues just as much as we do, because the Lord Yahweh is the best general ever. He is the Lord of hosts, and he's not going to tell, okay, point by point, here's exactly what I plan to do, so you can find a way to undo it. He knows that they can't undo it, but he's being obscure, just as he was with his first coming. The clues in the Old Testament, looking back on them, we can, hey, why did they miss it? Because it was obscure enough that they did miss it. We often laugh about this, that we think that in hell, that they're actually, these little prophecy meetings, they have conferences. And they have flow charts.
Okay.
Funny.
Speaker is Greb. Okay.
Oh, that's great. Yeah. And what's so amazing is God has still given us a ton of clues that I'm sure we don't have them all right, but he's given us enough to kind of latch onto and say, okay, something's going to happen. We can take hope that, God is going to win. He's given us enough so that when we see these things happening, where we're like, oh, that's what he was talking about, right?
Amen.
Yeah, that's why our eschatology has to be kind of fluid, because I'll tell you, if we stick too harshly or too strictly to one thing, time marches on and you're like, yeah, that wasn't right, and so we all just we do the best we can with eschatology, but it sure is fun.
On an erasable board.
Yes,
I know. Yeah, exactly. Man, guys, well, it has been so wonderful to have you on the show. I really appreciate you coming. I want to make sure that people know where to get your book, Veneration, so they can go to your website. If I'm correct, they can go to gilberthouse.org. Is that correct?
Yes.
And if they prefer, they can go to amazon.com as well. But this book is...
I was going to say, Amazon's got the Kindle version, and of course the website link will take you to Amazon, but they can get the best deal.
Skywatch TV.
Yeah, skywatchtvstore.com, because not only do they get that book, they'll get Sharon's most recent novel, Realms of the Dead. And again, she includes a lot of this research behind the really compelling fiction that she writes. She even includes some really historical and fascinating historical stuff on it. And Doug, I mentioned this at the conference in Lubbock, how Sir Charles Warren,
oh yes,
he climbed Mount Hermon in September of 1869, and he found this tablet there that says, "By the order of the Most High and Holy God, those who swore
yes,
the Costa Mesa. I wanted to ask you about that. Actually.
And the interesting thing about Costa Mesa, because Warren was he was an engineer, so he had this very meticulous drawing of what it looked like. It looks a bit like a portal, like a threshing floor. It's the threshing floor of hell.
Yeah.
Except, somebody said, "Oh, this is where it took place. Let's put a little temple here." And there's a big temple right before you get into this sort of walkway labyrinth.
Yeah. So anyway, they go there and they can get Sharon's most recent novel, that book, plus a book from about 1929.
Immortality in the Unseen World.
Yes, by W.O.E. Osterly, who didn't have access to these tablets, or rather these texts that have been found over the last 100 years or so. And some of them only translated, as I said, within the last 40 or 50 years. But he did a really good job with what he had to work with. So those 3 books plus the 2-hour DVD of our tour of Israel, which includes these sites and some of the stuff we found, including the mysterious site near Gilgal, Rephaim,
really
that we'll be
site.
exploring in more depth this spring. And that DVD set also includes 4 hours of additional teaching by Pastor Carl Gallups, Messianic Rabbi Zev Porat, and myself along the tour. All of that for $35. So 3 books and like 6 hours of video for $35. That's a deal.
Yeah, or if you're feeling really generous, you can also go for the $100 offer, which is all the Red Wing books plus all the other goodies. But the thing about that deal is all the proceeds go to Whispering Ponies Ranch.
Yeah, we've donated all of Sharon's novels, the Red Wing saga, to Skywatch TV, so that anything that's sold through the Skywatch TV store from the Red Wing saga, all of that goes to support the work at Whispering Ponies Ranch.
Wow, that's fantastic. Well, I put the link in the comments section. So again, Skywatch TV store.com /products/veneration -collection, and you guys can avail yourselves of this fantastic book. So much more that we didn't go into, but guys, thank you for doing wonderful research, for being very scholarly. I think that's so important, that as Christian researchers, that we don't take shortcuts. We actually go and do the research, and we always need to cite other people, because none of us knows it all. And we got to say, okay, this is what this guy who's a specialist in this area believes about this, and this is what he unearthed. And so when we do those things, then we are the richer for it. So thank you again for sharing on veneration, and thank you everyone in the chat for some interesting comments there. And till next time, stay in the Word, because God's Word is where we want to spend our time. And we have these wonderful resources to help us dig deeper. So thank you again, guys. God bless.
Thank you very much, Doug.